Coming up today on LinkedIn News Live, the pandemic's impact on the labor market has caused the unemployment rate to skyrocket to its highest level since the Great Depression. We're speaking with two startup founders whose companies are bringing innovative solutions to two big pandemic problems: staying up to date on your skills and buying a home. That's next on LinkedIn News Live. Child, and welcome to Business Unusual. Welcome to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins. It's Wednesday, September 23rd, and here's a quick look at the top stories that are trending right now on LinkedIn. It's climate change week, and the biggest companies in the world are announcing new plans to fight the problem. General Electric vowing to stop building coal-fired power plants, while Walmart said it would only use renewable electricity by 2035. The retail giant plans to take its global operations to zero emissions within 20 years. Meanwhile, displaced residents from wildfires are facing yet another headwind: increased housing costs. The blazes are increasing property values as competition for a smaller number of homes drives prices up, according to MarketWatch. The fires are impacting lower income residents the most, making this situation even more vulnerable. And as schools resume virtually for many students, working mothers, particularly those working in inflexible retail jobs, are feeling the pain. During the height of the pandemic, women were 3 times more likely than men to have left their jobs because of childcare issues, according to the Census Bureau. For a deeper dive on stories like these and how women and other diverse groups are being impacted by the pandemic, be sure to check out my weekly newsletter, Working Together. LinkedIn's top startups list, which was released yesterday, is a look at some of the most resilient companies out there. Joining me now to break down some of the trends on the list are my colleagues Devin Banerjee, who covers finance, as well as George Anders, who covers education. Devin and George, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Caroline.
All right, Devin, let's start with you. Better, the online mortgage startup, was #1 on the list this year. What does that really tell us about how home ownership is changing during this pandemic?
Yeah, well, the first thing I mentioned is the housing market is just on fire right now, Caroline. That's driven by a couple trends. Let's start with mortgage rates. Over the course of the past 6 months, we've actually seen about 10 new record lows set in mortgage rates. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage average dropping below 3%. That's really been led by the Federal Reserve, which brought down its benchmark interest rate near 0 in March to fight the pandemic. The second trend I'd mention is, look, we're all working from home right now. A significant portion of Americans report working from home. They're conducting remote learning from home as well for their children. And these families are looking for more space. You know, many of us spend a chunk of our day now daydreaming on Zillow or Redfin, looking for places to move and homes to buy. And then the third thing I'd mention is there was already pent-up demand for housing when the pandemic hit, primarily driven by this huge millennial generation aging into home ownership right now. As it relates to Better.com, you know, the home buying process, if you think about, you know, people going through that process, they really want it to be digital. They want to get rid of those mountains of paperwork. They want it to be faster. They have all their information digitally. They don't understand why they need a week or 2 weeks for a mortgage to be pre-approved. And they're wary of those commissioned loan officers. They want to trust the other counterparties in the mortgage process more. Those are all problems that Better.com, our #1 top startup, is tackling.
And George, you looked into how well these startups are sourcing diverse talent, which is particularly important for companies like Better, who have a very diverse customer base. What did you find in terms of who's doing this the best?
So we found 3 startups that really stand out in terms of opening the doors wider for women in particular, for having good promotion records and good retention records. And it's not enough just to say, we'll get you in. You want to create an environment where people can thrive. And the 3 that stood at the top, Guild Education, and we'll be hearing more from Guild CEO, Rachel Carson, later on. Also Curative, which does COVID testing. And in addition, Uncork, which has a really novel take on software. So 3 different industries, 3 different parts of the country. The uplifting thing was you can achieve better diversity. It just takes a plan to do it.
Another trend that I noticed on the list, Devin, is that there's just a ton of fintech companies. We saw fintech have a strong presence last year. How does that change as we think about the pandemic and its impact on how people are managing their finances?
You're right, Caroline. Even a stronger presence this year by fintech startups near the top of the list. What's really powered fintech generally over time are three things I would say. People want their delivery of financial services to be low cost. They want it to be accessible, meaning, on their phone or on their computer. And they want ease of use. They want a good, trustworthy user experience. And that's really been powering fintech over time. And we're really seeing that, especially with those consumer fintechs this year. Better.com, #1, Robinhood, #3, up from #7 on our list last year. As a matter of fact, Caroline, since yesterday when our list was unveiled, meaning last night, Robinhood announced that it's raised an additional $460 million in funding. That brings its valuation to $11.7 billion. That's up about 54% from just 12 months ago when we profiled the company. I would also mention that the talent base for fintech is really swelling. Our friends at LinkedIn Talent Insights sent me over some data this morning. In the past 5 years, 2015 to 2020, we've seen profiles on LinkedIn listing fintech skills grow by 1,100%. That's a 12-fold increase in just the past 5 years. So the interest in fintech among the talent base and the expertise is growing as well. That's really also helping power the fintech ecosystem.
And George, what Kevin is really talking about is getting the skills that you need through this pandemic. Fintech, certainly we're seeing a demand for those skills, but what else stood out to you on this list? And the startups who are trying to get workers the skills that they need to be resilient and get to the next level in their career.
So online education is really booming, and it's going in two different directions, which is kind of interesting. And the biggest area, of course, is things that will help you with your career. So a cloud guru is on the list. They will teach you how to be a player in cloud computing. Guild Education, which we're going to be hearing from CEO Rachel Carson, they will provide a tremendous range of skills that will help people be better in their business. But there's also an interest in just plain having something fun to do. I mean, there's the edutainment component of education. Masterclass is on our list, and they'll teach you how to be a better cook. They'll teach you how to improve your gardening game. You may not make a living from it, but you'll be happier, and education can take you in both directions.
Devin, as we think about the recovery, we are a long way to say that we are through the recovery of this pandemic, and we're seeing some uneven recovery, particularly with unemployment, permanent unemployment on the rise, but the rate is falling. What does this really mean for the startup market overall, and what we can anticipate, say, for IPOs and the such?
As you alluded to, Caroline, I think there's a divergence occurring in the startup ecosystem as well. We're probably going to see a divergence between those more established or mature startups versus those just getting off the ground with little to no existing customer base or user base. I think we'll see a divergence as well between SaaS and platform companies. As a matter of fact, a lot of LinkedIn members were commenting on our list yesterday saying none of these companies create a physical product effectively. They're all creating software and technology. So I think we'll see a divergence between software startups and those with a physical product. But what I want to leave viewers with is a line that has stuck with me. I interviewed Max Levchin. He's the CEO and founder of Affirm, another one of the most highly valued fintech startups right now. And he said for entrepreneurs with a great idea and a large market, this is actually a uniquely great time to start a company, because what you can do is burrow in and build through the course of this pandemic and this crisis, and then emerge with little to no competitors at the other end of it, because your competitors probably have not been doing that during this crisis. And so he says if he were not running a firm right now, he would probably be trying to start 2 or 3 companies right now during this crisis.
And George, as Devin alluded to, it's one thing to just try and survive this crisis, but to lead a company through it is a whole other matter. Through your reporting, what have you learned in terms of what's working for startup founders on the ground?
So one of the really important insights is that your employees are not just one undifferentiated mass. Everyone's got their own story. There are people who have little kids who are trying to run a school in addition to their office at home. There are people who've got elderly parents who've got outreach that they need to deal with there. Single parents have their own set of issues. And I think the most attuned companies are really making sure that whatever they offer in the way of employee support is very customized, is very relevant to each particular employee segment, and creating an environment where people in like situations can reinforce each other through virtual meetups, through use of tools like Slack. And so people don't feel alone. And clearly what the pandemic has done is broken down a lot of our social connection, and a thoughtful company will look for ways to build that back.
Well, George and Devin, it's always a pleasure to sit down with both of you, albeit virtually. Thank you for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.
Thanks, Caroline.
That was my colleagues, George Anders and Devin Banerjee, breaking down some of the trends on LinkedIn's top startups list. If you're not following them on LinkedIn for more insights on finance, education, and beyond, be sure to do so. All right, now it's time to hear from some of the founders on the list itself. I want to welcome the CEO and co-founder of Guild Education, Rachel Carlson, to the show. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Rachel, let's take me back. Take me back to the beginning of this pandemic when it first started, really hit the waves here in the US in March. What was top of mind for you in terms of both supporting your employee base as well as those who use Guild Education?
Sure. So, at the beginning, it felt like this was strictly a health crisis. We now know it's a health crisis, a financial crisis, a mental health crisis. But in the beginning, things we tried to do internally for our employees, we reopened our open enrollment so that folks could make differentiated decisions about their healthcare that might be important given the new data we were collecting about who was vulnerable in the pandemic and family circumstances. And then as it relates to our customers, our students, and our employer partners, we spent a lot of time thinking, and this evolved as we started to see the financial impact of this pandemic. We spent a lot of time thinking about the 50 million plus workers who've now lost their jobs and how Guild could ensure that we were supporting those workers the same way we've over the last 5 years supported the frontline American workforce. And that's meant thinking a lot about what are the jobs of the future, how is it being accelerated, and how do we make sure our students and those who've lost their jobs or need to change jobs are preparing for the right roles that are accelerating and rather than falling away in this economy.
Let's dive into that a little bit more. The pandemic brought up a slew of issues in terms of employment and the jobs that people need in order to be prepared for the jobs of the future. How did Guild respond in terms of the programs that they were offering and the slew of things that you were doing with your employee base?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, we've grown our learning marketplace by about 40% this year, which is pretty significant. And that means we're always continuing to look for and add programs that align with jobs of the future. Think data analytics, program management, allied healthcare, helping workers transition out of jobs that are falling away, like retail and hospitality. It also has meant thinking about how do we build innovative solutions. So we've been one of the founding members of the Skill Up Coalition, which brought together nonprofits and industry partners and tech companies like ours to build solutions for the 50 million plus Americans who've lost a job since March.
I want to go ahead and say hello to some members who are joining us in the stream right now. Alejandro from Irvine, Ty from New York. Lisa says, I'm in the process of creating a class on the topic of math anxiety. Lisa, I'm not sure exactly what math anxiety is, but maybe tell us a little bit more. I see Rachel probably knows a little bit more about that than I do. She says education is key. Thank you for joining us on today's show. Rachel, I sat down with you in person, if the people on the stream can believe this, if they can remember a time in which you could sit down with people in person pre-pandemic. And one of the things that we talked about was you were in the process of building a childcare center for your employees. Childcare is now even a bigger issue for employees right now. How did those plans have to be put on hold? And how are you thinking about supporting your working parents at Guild right now?
Yeah, we're on track building out the space and trying to pay as close attention as we can to other employer-sponsored childcare centers. But as you know, those are few and far between, as well as learning from what all the other childcare centers that have been open for years have figured out in the pandemic. So we are hoping to open it in early 21, and our employees need it more than ever before. But we've also been trying to do the very best we can to come up with innovative solutions to support our employees who are caring for children, caring for elderly family members. But it's been really, really hard. And I think that's worth admitting, because I think every company right now, every leader I know is grappling with feeling like we don't have all the solutions.
And Guild stands out to me because of its dedication to things like childcare. But another reason that Guild is unique on this year's list is that you are not in San Francisco, and you're not in New York either. I think 48% of LinkedIn top startups are based in San Francisco. Why are you there? Why did you decide Denver was the place that you wanted to call home for your company?
Yeah, for me personally, my husband and I knew we wanted to raise a family, and our families were here, and I knew I was going to try and do that while founding a company. And so the ability to live 7 minutes from the office when we used to go to the office, that mattered quite a bit. It meant I could skip in and out, come back home, see my kids. The ability to be in a town that has really nurtured a diversity of talent. We wanted tech talent, but we also wanted a great staff of our coaches and advisors. And we knew that education passion sat in the mission drivenness of Denver's tech culture. So it really was the right place for us to grow, and we're thrilled to continue to grow here and looking forward to all being in the same office again one day.
And as you're growing and helping employees with the next generation of skills that they need for the future, break down for those in the stream what skills are top of mind and in the most demand right now through the pandemic.
Sure. So we've seen the pandemic really accelerate future of work trends. And on one level, that's interesting intellectually, but it's quite scary for the average American worker. You're seeing an increase in skills tied to working with technology, data analytics, project management, but also the things that technology can't do well, like people management and allied healthcare. What we are finding is that for the cashiers of America, the folks who today augment technology, that is a scary financial position to be in, because we know that cashier roles and other roles like that are going to be displaced by technology that's going to be implemented at an accelerated rate, given everything that's been going on in the economy.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live and for that snapshot about how the jobs of the future are going to change post-pandemic. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That was Rachel Carlson joining us from Denver, where she is the CEO and co-founder of Guild Education. All right, now I want to bring on the CEO of Better, the #1 company on this year's list, Vishal Gar. He's joining us. I don't know, he's going to have to actually tell us where he's joining us from, because I'm not sure. I wasn't able to ask him before the show. It seems like we might be having a technical issue bringing him in. I see him now. Vishal, thank you for joining us on LinkedIn News Live.
Hey, great to have. Thank you for having us. It's a real pleasure.
All right, so let's talk about Better. You started this company because of a frustrating experience that you personally had with getting a mortgage. Tell me about that experience and some of the headwinds you faced, trying to tell investors that there needed to be another solution for this very common thing that Americans do daily.
My wife and I, we had a 2-year-old, and we were expecting another baby, and we wanted to buy a house where the kids could have their nurseries and play, and so we went to go look at lots of different places, and we found a place we loved. We put in an offer on it, but in order to actually have our offer accepted, we needed to be pre-approved. And I was like, what is that? And the mortgage process took forever. And I thought, and then we eventually ended up losing the house to someone who paid all cash, even though they paid 7% less than what we did. And I was like, this is fundamentally unfair. And if it's this broken for me and my wife, who are sort of urban and professionals, how broken is it for everyone else? And I was like, this has got to be something that better, there's got to be a better way to do this. And no one was out there making one. And so I said, I know a lot about mortgages. I know about consumer finance. I know about technology. Let me take a whack at it. So I took the down payment that we were going to use to buy a home and started better.com.
And the home buying industry, it's been around forever. It's an understatement to say. What made you think that you had the solution? And talk to us a little bit about some of the headwinds that you faced with investors trying to convince them of the same thing.
Well, I think, this is a really big industry, $15 trillion of mortgages outstanding, $34 trillion of residential real estate. There's like 6,000 mortgage companies. So investors are saying, the first thing that they said to me is that you'll never make a loan without a commissioned loan officer, and that you can't motivate people to actually work in a salaried plus bonus based on customer satisfaction environment. In the past 3 months, we've done $10 billion of loans and helped over 25,000 customers save $7,000 a year. And so it's been pretty amazing to see that. But in the beginning, the investors would just not agree that you can make loans without loan officers that are commissioned.
You've actually doubled in size in the past 6 months, which the pedagogy in cross startup land is that you actually want to grow slow. How are you dealing with this rapid growth, particularly during the pandemic?
I think the growth is insane, and we're just trying to serve the customers that we can and the customers that are coming in through our door. Last year, 65% or so of mortgages were made inside a bank branch or a mortgage broker's office. So if you can think about, millions and millions of consumers who now might want to refinance at these really low rates, or buy a home and not go through a process that's physical or fax or things like that. This is really the industry that time forgot. Like, it operates as if the internet never was invented. And so we're just trying to help consumers. And so we think about the growth rate, but we really think about how many consumers did we help today? And if we can help more, it's a sacrifice worth making. And it's something that we can help grow and be one of the bright spots in the local economy and hire people that have been displaced by other professions that would have never considered our company. Those are all amazing things. So, when startups, when you join a startup, you dream of this. You want to surf the tsunami. You want it to work, and it's magical when it does. So, we're answering the challenge.
I want to go ahead and say hello to some more members who are joining us in the stream right now. Salvador from Barcelona, Lisa from Chicago, Andrea from Florida, and John from Rhode Island. If you're just joining us, this is LinkedIn News Live. We're having a conversation about LinkedIn's top startups list with the CEO of the #1 company on the list this year, Better. Vishal, I've also seen a ton of Better employees joining us in the stream as well. Allison, Laura, and Charlotte are just a few. So say hello to them. I'm sure that they're just as excited as you are to be on the list this year. Okay, Vishal, we're in the throes of a downturn right now. And as we saw at the top of the show, that's impacting not just how people are thinking about home ownership overall, but we have these forest fires that are really impacting the mortgage market as well. How is this really impacting home ownership, both the pandemic as well as these forest fires that are raging across the West Coast?
I think we have two contravening trends. So the first is that for a long, long time, you couldn't give away the houses that were in the suburbs. So, I'm in Connecticut now, just for the kids' school, and hopefully New York City schools open soon, and we're going to be back there. But there are people sitting on houses for 6-7 years trying to get out of them, empty nesters, aging baby boomers, and they just couldn't even sell them. And so home prices have come up as you see this massive wave of suburbanization. But what has been more and more important is actually the interest rates have come down. And so people don't think about buying a $300,000 house when they first start thinking. They think, well, I'm paying $1,500 a month in rent. How much can I afford for $1,500 a month or $1,600 a month? And the dramatic change in interest rates means this is an amazing, amazing time to buy a home, because you can afford way, way, way more now than you could have before. And people are doing the math, and they're coming to better.com, and they're getting a pre-approval letter, and they're figuring out, wow, I can afford a house that's beyond what I thought was affordable a year or 2 years ago for probably the same or even less than what I pay in rent, because rents really haven't come down nearly as much as interest rates have come down. And in doing that, I can build a home for myself, my family, and actually build some savings in an asset class that I understand. All of those things are driving people to, towards housing in a way that they've not done in a generation.
Well, Vishal, I hope that my husband is listening in on the stream right now, because I would love to buy a home as well. It sounds like now is the right time. Vishal, I'm seeing a ton of members in the stream right now who are asking questions about what it's like to start a business and new venture, particularly to run one during a downturn. What is your advice to them in terms of if they're looking for new opportunities or want to start their own company right now?
I would say, think about something that you really, really, really care about, and then never quit. People will tell you all the time that you should quit, that you should, maybe do this as a bigger company. And I think fundamentally, the one thing I've learned, I've been an entrepreneur nearly 20 years, is that if you can make something that the consumer clicks and they buy, then as long as the consumer keeps clicking and buying and you keep serving them well, you should never quit, because there's going to be, at some point in time, this watershed event that's going to change things and drive the customers to you. And it's really, really hard to keep waiting. And it's not a if, it's a when. And so never quit.
We also always have a ton of job seekers joining us on LinkedIn News Live, and you're hiring, which is a feat right now in the pandemic. What are you looking for in terms of the candidates that you want to join Better?
I think the number one thing is that they have to have a passion for helping people make their home better, to help them either get a refinancing so they can live a better life, they can send their kids to college, or to get to buy a home in a better school district with a better commute because they got a cheaper rate. And I think that's number one, that passion for helping people put themselves and their lives in a better place. The number two thing, grit. As I said, never quit. We hire people who work hard, who are willing to make sacrifices and put others above themselves. And then number three, hustle, intelligence. I know sometimes hustle is cast the wrong way when people think about some of the startups, but we are in the most regulated industry in America. We hustle on behalf of the consumer. We do what it takes to make sure that the consumer is happy and is making an informed decision. And hustle on behalf of the consumer is really important. So I think those are the things that we really look for. We don't have a college degree requirement for the bulk of the jobs that we hire for them. If you dropped out of college because you thought like you'd make a better career doing the thing you loved, we would love and applaud that. Those are the types of things that we look for. We're really helping people achieve the American dream, and we want people who embody the American dream to help our customers achieve the American dream.
Well, Vishal, thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn News Live and sharing your insights on homeownership, skills needed through the pandemic and beyond. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate you guys believing in us.
That was Vishal Gar. He is the CEO and founder of Better. I want to thank him for joining us on LinkedIn News Live. I also want to thank Rachel Carlson, the co-founder and CEO of Guild Education, for sharing her insights as well. This is LinkedIn News Live, a daily live show where tomorrow we are bringing you a look into the jobs and the chat for the healthcare industry at the top startups and how they made the list this year. They're meeting the urgent demands that the pandemic is creating. My colleague Susie Jackson will be back with you tomorrow on that. You're not going to want to miss that. It'll be 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific here on the LinkedIn News page. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you so much for joining us.